Today, we're going to talk about right choices in general. You know, I don't really tell a lot of stories depending on what it's about from my past, but I do believe that making right choices is a huge choice in general that you need to make when it comes to the idea of whether or not you're going to continue on the same path you're on or in general change up who you are. It definitely depends on making the right choices. Sometimes you notice in your lifetime when you look back, when you were younger, you used to make some wild choices. You used to make some uh, different ideas in your mind that made you think of things that you should be doing, how you should be living. Maybe you saw things online. Maybe you saw things in the neighborhood around you or the culture you were around. It is very interesting how some of that can really kind of tailor your life as you move forward, some of it being good and some of it being bad. A little bit of story I would have to say on right choices is where I'm at now financially, I do super well for myself. Successfully, super well. Okay. In my career, I do well. In those aspects, I do great. And it's funny how your idea of what you believe you can do to be successful is interesting on how you can skew it depending on different things. So when I was younger, the culture I used to hang around with were some wild boys, man. I used to hang around with some real drug dealers, some real gang type people, I guess. People that definitely shot people, stabbed people, killed people. They got killed, they got stabbed, they got shot. People that died of drugs, people that were rich on drugs, people that dealt a lot of drugs, heavy drugs, everything. Those are the types of people who I used to align myself with, all while still being super athletic, still being, pretty popular, successful in school, just in general, all around, all over the place, like literally everywhere. And I think that's interesting because so many different times through my life, I was on probation as a kid. I was on, legitimate probation, from the town juvenile probation on. I mean, that's just what it is. Made some bad choices on who I hung around with. Me, myself, didn't really make a bad decision, as in, I didn't commit a crime that was harmful really at all. There was a lot that we'll get into on some other story time for that. But I was thinking that I could still be very successful, be high up, ranking in society or whatever you would call it, and still while living that type of life, or maybe that type of life would get me there. And when I was younger, a lot of people didn't realize that, I hung around with all these people. I was there when, many different types of drugs were there right in front of me. Had the option to sell many different times an array of different drugs. And it's interesting because I could have went those routes and I definitely could have made some money in the short term. I had a lot of friends who were some heavy dealers, man, made good money. Some of them really aren't around anymore, while some are. Some are completely either in jail, they murdered somebody, or they're not alive, or whatever, okay? And some were able to become high up and then get out and live a good life now. They may not be living a life they lived when they were dealing drugs, but they were doing okay. So in my mind, I saw so many different levels of people and so many different ages of people who were drug dealers that I used to say to myself, wow, I could probably do that. And I was in college, I was in high school, been offered all those different times. And I used to always come back to the same idea. And I think that the culture I grew up in and making those choices is really what was able to guide me to the right spot, because I knew that I would be able to make something quick. I could make some money right now. I could have certain items in my life that maybe I thought material wise I wanted, or that I wanted to be able to flex on somebody. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I knew how much money I could make on a brick, on a bun, on whatever. And whoever really knows those kind of drugs will know what I'm talking about. And I remember sitting to myself thinking, this is the profits I could make off this, this, and this. And I used to take into consideration, though, if you got caught up, what are you losing? And what type of time does that take away that you have to really put into the hourly cost of what you're doing? Because everybody looks at it as, oh man, you might make 2 grand a day. Sure, you could divide it out by a whole day, how much per hour, then take out time that if you got put in jail that one day, 2 grand, and you was in jail for 30 days, well, you got to count that whole 30 days on an hourly wage out of that. Doesn't really seem to be a lot. Half the time it hits minimum wage depending on what level you're at. For me, I knew that I wasn't ready to make that type of commitment every time, all the way to where I would start to get into those types of troubles. Now, I'm not going to say I didn't do anything in my life and I never really was a part of anything in some fashion or some level, or utilize the favor system, or, that type of idea of things that you do to get things done for you or to help you out in life, depending on what was going on. But when it came to the drug dealing game, I knew that for me, I felt as though I was on a higher path, and I felt as though if I took that route all the way, committed all my time, because the biggest thing about me is I'm not going to give 50%. So if I'm going to do that, I'm going to be 100% at it. I can't give you 50% at college, or 50% at owning my own business, or 50% at hustling to go back to school, to be in the medicine field, and give you 50% on dealing drugs or that type of aspect or other items. There are other things that were presented to me as items that I could utilize in a commerce and, sell or whatever, trade, this and that. So it always was very interesting because that short term type of idea and that type of thinking is so easy to fall into because it's so quick. Like, man, I don't want to worry about rent. Bang, bang, bang. Cool. I could do this, make some money. Where you have to think about that rent right now might be tough to make, and it's going to be a tough decision for you. But in the long run, that rent ain't nothing compared to what you could own, what you could have, an empire that you could make in your own life for yourself, your family, where you don't have to really worry on the outside about being taken away from your family and going to jail, or being broke, paying fines, losing everything, losing your girl, losing your kids, your parents, or your own life. Plenty of times my friends, man, are not with us anymore. I've had friends from the same, different groups. I was the same type of friend to both, but they were from two different groups, and they ended up taking each other's lives. One took another life due to them trying to take other people's lives. And it's crazy when you think about it, because that type of thinking is what they felt they had at that time. The choices that they had to make at that time, they felt were right, because maybe they didn't have the same guidance, or maybe they were committed to that type of process. Like I said, if you're going to do something, you do it at 100%. You don't do it at 75, 80%. You don't do it at 20%. You always want to give 100 at all times. And that's just interesting when you really look at the gravity of the choices. So if you make a negative choice and you know it's a negative choice, you know what's going to come out of that. It's not like you have to be surprised. And when you act surprised, that's just really being fake to yourself and everybody else, because you knew when you made the wrong choice what was going to happen. And for me, on those types of situations, how many times, it was brought to me, guns, drugs, whatever, it was right on my fingertips. And I mean, you could taste it, man. It was right there. Everything that you thought in a short term you could get was right in front of you. All that opportunity to do with it whatever you wanted to do was right there. Where you might have felt like you was the man on campus, where you was the man around, where you was the man in your neighborhood, where you thought, man, you was untouchable and you could do anything. And then you start to realize little by little, every single thing you do, the cause and effect, you're gonna have something that comes out of that. You're going to have a consequence. You're going to have a situation that's going to tear away what you're trying to build. And the one thing about me, that no matter how much I always might deviate on certain things or make bad choices on certain personal parts of my life, or bad behaviors or vices or addictions on certain stuff, I always knew that success in what I really wanted to be was always going to push me farther and get me where I needed to be. I may not have always had a for sure answer on what I was supposed to do to be successful, but I knew that where I was at in that moment was not where I was supposed to be in the future. And for me, that was one of the biggest things that just kept kind of pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. And I'm very grateful, because at least in those choices, I can look back on it and say, my people are my people, and I still have some of the best friends that are around that type of situations, or at least have really good people that are still around, that's what they might do in their personal life. You know that you just can't really do that, and that's not you. And a lot of the time, if you're real about it and honest, people respect that a lot more, because you're not faking it. You're not trying to act like you could do something you can't, or something that you won't do. just to flex on somebody, a little Instagram post or social media, or in a girl you meet or whatever. A lot of the time, I don't even really talk about that kind of stuff. This is the first time I've ever really brought it up like this because I think it's very interesting. And, as time goes on, we'll definitely get more deeper into this different stuff because I think those choices make a difference. But today, it's just about in general making choices that might be blind choices because you don't really know what you're about to be, but you know that you're meant for something more. And I don't see that you're meant for something more negatively. I think that's a mindset. I think that you're meant to be something more, even in a positive manner. You just don't realize what it's going to be yet. So it kind of blinds you. And when you're making those choices, you pick a wrong choice because it might give you something short term that you think you deserved or that you needed when really it was a want. Your needs are your long term, your wants are your short terms. Um, that's really how it is because the decisions you make might seem good right now. And right now could be a year, could be 2 years. But man, if you're 25 years old and you live another 75 years, you might have got 2 years out of a choice. You still got 73 more years to go. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you have to be mindful of that type of thinking, especially when you're making choices. And if you're just honest with yourself and honest with somebody else, you're always going to make the right choice if you're truly at the core honest with yourself. What is it getting you? Why are you making the choice? And be honest about it. Don't try to make it up. Don't try to make up a reason. Don't make excuses. Like, just be honest about it. And the majority of the time, it's going to get you where you need to be. Be honest with everybody else. If you're going to do something, be honest. If somebody asks you, be honest about what you're doing. Maybe you might feel differently once you're honest, because if you're blatantly honest and you know that you're not going to lie about it, you might have a different mindset after they speak to you or they voice to you what their concerns are. So continue to make the right choices. No matter, you're always going to have a choice to make. Doesn't matter on everything between what you're going to eat for breakfast, healthy, unhealthy, or where you're going to lay your head down at night, where you're going to spend your money, anything, man. Just always remember to tell yourself the truth. Don't lie about anything, including yourself, and make the right choice depending on that at all times.